Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Jin Ong and I'm your host. I practice as an osteopath and psychosomatic therapist and am fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain and live the life they want, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Emma Ferris is the trailblazer behind the breath effect. She's been described as a wellness architect, a breathing geek, and someone who is truly, madly, deeply committed to teaching the world to embrace stress and reduce its impact by breathing effectively and tuning into yourself. By sharing her life journey of trauma, stress, and grief, she shares the tools that have helped her reset her health and life. She motivates people to make change when they are ready and in a sustainable way. Emma's training as a physiotherapist and breathing coach have combined to offer a unique lens on how you reset your health when in times of stress. She believes learning to change the physical habits of our body, including the way we breathe, are critical elements to processing trauma and stress. She combines the research into stress with practical, everyday tools. Emma's created multiple online experiences and trainings that help people reset their bad habits, reduce stress, and cultivate more moments of calm. Her first online training is Breathe Right and Reduce Your Stress, a 30-day revolutionary training where Emma coaches you in her videos and live breathing masterclasses. It's designed for both men and women, and Breathe Right is targeted at people that are ready to make a change in their relationship with stress and health. After working with women on retreats and seeing the need for women-specific guided coaching experiences, Emma created the Busy Woman's Guide to Cultivating Calm. Cultivating Calm is a virtual retreat that guides women through a journey to reset their stress, health, and relationships. Emma is definitely not your average physiotherapist. She's a breathing and stress transformation coach, a motivational and corporate speaker, acupuncturist, and Pilates instructor with over 15 years of clinical experience. Recently, in collaboration with her sister Sarah, Emma created a podcast to share her pain story about being conned by the man she dated. It's been wildly successful and listened by people all around the world. It's called Conning the Con. I'll pop the link in the podcast notes and enjoy listening to my interview with the amazing Emma Ferris. Welcome to the podcast, Emma. So good to have you on. You are one of my greatest friends. Actually, it's so funny. I should share with people how we met. It was
absolutely
another physio friend. Well, I'm not a physio, I'm an osteo, but you're a physio. And it was a physio friend who said, oh my gosh, you've got to meet my friend, Emma Ferris. And we met. And within a week, we were scheming this big community event where we thought it'd be great to get 50 people. And we thought that that was really high numbers. And you had booked the location. We hit 80 people. We had to cancel that. We had to go to the big community centre. And we ended up having 350 people come to our event where we're sharing more about this mind-body connection and the deeper stuff that us as health practitioners know needs to be addressed. All the stuff around emotions and all these chronic illness and issues that people are having and they can't get to the root of it. So yeah, our relationship really blossomed within a week. We created this massive event and we've just kept in touch with one another, supported one another. And yeah, I'm so happy that that person introduced us.
Me too. Kindred weirdos, we might be called by somebody else that looks from the outside, because we have this energy when we get together is pretty special. And what it showed, I think, from that event was the hunger that people have for this information, for looking at things differently, this dissatisfaction in the way they're living their lives and the way that we're taught is that we're supposed to be doing things, and that belief systems that we have imprinted. So yeah, I'm loving our journey so far, Jen. I can't wait to see where it takes us, and I thank you for all the support and encouragement and pushing along the way as you do in a very kind-hearted way.
Yes. Oh, it's been amazing. And we're both Sagittarians. So I think there's something in that. All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm Emma, and I'm actually a mum. And normally I don't ever start with that, but I am today. I'm a mum of 2 kids. They're 10 and 7. And they have been my biggest teachers in lots of ways in the last few years. But my other big teachers have been my patients. So I'm a physiotherapist by training, similar to you. I guess with your osteo, you started as that, and I did with my physio. But I know that I have blended and added and evolved into a very different mix of what I do. So I'm an acupuncturist, similar to you, as well as a breathing coach, breathing and stress management coach. And I'll talk a bit more about that today, about how my journey started with that. But it has been probably the area where it is the area I'm really most passionate about because of my own experiences, but also I think because I see the missing link between, for me, that idea of understanding what our body's doing, so that mind-body connection, that stress reaction, and being able to make a change that is sustainable, that gets us out of this state of stress, and that gives people control back. And so for me, a big part of that was breathing, pausing, slowing down, because I am a definitely type A, on the go, busy person that loves to get moving, fast talker as well. So slow me down if you need to, Jen. And
Okay.
I have always lived my life at very much a goal-driven pace, and for success early on was very different from what my success vision is now. But earlier on, it very much was to be to achieve and get ahead, and it meant that at a very young age. I think I was felt young back then. 24, I started my own physio practice in a very small town of Wanaka, where it is no longer small; it is booming, and that's where you live right now, Jen. So I'm actually sad we never lived in the same place at the same time, because I think that would have been a lot of fun as well. And then life evolved, and my physio practice blossomed. I had several physios working for me, and then a Pilates studio at one point. And it got to the point when a few years into it, and I had this year of like massive growth and change. So I did that acupuncture course that you've done, that we met our fellow physio that introduced us. And I was exposed to some phenomenal techniques in that training, particularly the dry needling, which I then went on to teach with this amazing physio, and also to a bit more in-depth awareness of this connection with the nervous system and how much we are driving that nervous system so hard, and we don't get taught that how to actually change it. So there was a big lesson in that year. I think it was 2009, that was all kicking off. And I also did this massive leadership course that was about 18 months, this Future Leaders program. And so I had this huge transformation of who I was and what I was doing. And then I got married as well. This whole let's do the white picket fence thing. I met my my husband when I was 22, and we had visions of growing things together and building this life. But it wasn't the story that would work out in the end. I'm sure I'll share a bit more about that today as we go through. And then following on from there, the crazy year of growth and personal growth and family growth, that next year in 2010, my little boy Baxter was born. But over that year, I probably went through some of at that time, my hardest moments, where I had a condition called hyperemesis gravatum, which is extreme morning sickness. So Kate Middleton's had it. I had it first, but I definitely think I could have done with the hell having the doctors on standby 24/7. But I didn't really understand back then what was going on, because everybody gets a bit of morning sickness here and there. Or some people do, some people don't. But I had to go extreme. Again, type A, had to be the best at doing something. And that really hurt my whole body. And I didn't realize at the time it was a lot to do with the way that I've been driving my body before that. So I figured out then I had to change some things in my life. It wasn't good enough to eat well and do some exercise here and there. I was pretty good with doing that, but it just wasn't enough. My body was being depleted and run down, and my alarm systems were telling me, but I was not listening. And I'm very, very good at overriding that alarm system in lots of ways. And unfortunately, that's also been part of my downfall in the last few years, again, as I'll share about today.
So we've got a number of things to cover, and I know you'll be really great at intertwining the story and also everything with business as well.
Yeah.
But before I get into that, can you just describe what hyperemesis gravidum is for people that don't know?
Yeah, so it's extreme morning sickness. Instead of just your being sick once or twice a day, it means that you end up losing 10% of your body weight. So I was growing this little baby inside me, but I was almost losing weight, and it ended up being, I think I lost, like, I'm a small person anyway, but it was a good like 10 kgs, and I think I got down to like 47 kgs at one point, which is tiny for me. And it just means you're getting postnatally depleted when the baby comes out. So your body's running on empty. Your baby's taking all the nutrients, but you haven't got much left yourself. So I was in bed for several weeks because I didn't have the energy from, if I did get up, I would probably be sick. And then I got sick, then I would end up losing more energy. And it wasn't until I kind of got doctor support finally along that journey that it kind of began to change.
Yeah, and in the meantime, you were trying to run a busy practice in the
Yeah, there was that.
Yeah.
There was all those factors along the way that kind of shaped my need to kind of go, all right, I got to get back to this. I'm just pregnant, I'm just carrying a baby. And it's like, no, you need to slow down.
Yeah, and this is what I often talk about, being hit with that illness, the disease, or the pain and injury that forces you to slow down and then really reflect. And some people, even in that state, will not reflect, and they might come across something else that takes them out again. And so on reflection, because did you have hyperemesis again, gravidum, with your second?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, with Samara, it was worse because I had Baxter to look after. There'd been a little bit in between that phase of between when Baxter was born and Samara was when I was pregnant with her. That was a big life moment as well, and I'll share that a bit in a second. So I was really unwell with Samara and in and out of hospital, and then I was really needing IV fluids several days a week to actually get on top of the hydration and the fluid loss. But between Baxter and Samara, so 1 year after Baxter was born, my now ex-husband, which is one of the things we'll talk about today, we're very amicably divorced. So we actually live on the same street right now and co-parent in a beautiful way. I'm really proud of what we do. But it was at that time when Baxter was one that he finally put his hand up and said, I'm not coping. And he's okay with me sharing this, which I'm so excited about, because more men and women need to be aware that it is okay to reach out. And at that time, I didn't know what he meant by I'm not okay. And it seems crazy because I work in this mental health and wellness area, but this is this guy that was just trudging along, quiet farm boy that didn't know how to say I'm not okay. And we finally figured it. Well, I said, "Do you think you could be depressed?" And we went off to the doctors and finally got support for him. And it was a slight turning point, but not the point that we needed for that transformation. So that meant for me, I saw this man, beautiful man that I was building this life with, that he wasn't coping. And so while I just got through my illness and still feeling very exhausted post having that baby, I then had to go, right, I've got to carry the family. He wasn't feeling like he could work a lot of the time, and we're both self-employed. So I was like, crap, what am I going to do? Like, this is financially on me, this is emotionally on me, and this little human needs to be looked after. Oh, and there's that business that needs to be, it was in growth phase. I was like, crap. And I'm notoriously bad at asking for help. So it was all these kind of factors that were like blooming, and and we didn't talk about mental health even that decade ago very well in our country, and in my family, and definitely not in his family. So it was really big. It was a big time of change. And it was at that point that we decided about a year afterwards, I was like, something has to give. Like, I'm not going to burn myself out consistently for the next few years trying to keep this family together in this state. We need to figure out what our new version of life could be like. And so we decided that I would sell the business, this business I loved and the people I loved to work with and to treat. And that was about after 7 years of starting it, and would move to a very small town that he always found really calming and restorative, and it's less kind of challenging in some ways because you can hide away, like this little town at the top of Lake Wakatipu near Queenstown. It's only got like 400 people, so you can do your thing. It's a great place to kind of recover, escape. A lot of people come and escape here. I shouldn't say that because a lot of people will be listening to it going, well, they're probably going, it's true, actually. And this town has been amazing. So we kind of sold sections and property, and then we built a house because Mike husband was a builder, and we set up this new life here. I had no idea what I was going to do because I had this big physio practice, and I was like, yes, I got this chance to step back a little bit and be a present mum more than I had been. But that didn't actually work out that way. The story didn't kind of evolve and me being able to have more time, because as we went through that next pregnancy, which was a lovely surprise. It's not always that way that you have pregnancies come along so easily, but Samara was meant to be here, definitely. And if I had planned to, I'm not sure if I would have been able to go through with this, knowing the sickness was going to possibly happen. And I think there's also this fear, absolute fear with response, with knowing that I'd been sick and unwell that first time, and I did, I couldn't build the business and I had to stop and pause. And it was this enforced pausing that was really hard. And again, I went, okay, didn't listen the first time with what I was doing. Didn't listen with the recovery after pregnancies. But I just think I was in survival mode for about a decade of my life, because financially and emotionally, I felt like I was carrying it.
Wow. I know that this will help other mums out there who have experienced that hyperemesis gravidum, because I think you're sharing a lot of insight and reflection on the stress and everything that was going on in your life and acknowledging it. And I think you're acknowledging even more a decade later.
Oh yeah, I'm sure another 20 years, it'll be like, oh, could have done that better.
And nice to see that you're reflecting on it and you're able to laugh at it. You probably weren't laughing at all in the moment.
No, but I must admit, laughter is a big coping mechanism for me. It's something that has helped me through the last 2 years particularly, and to reframe things. And I actually realized that I really enjoy that, something to be playful. And part of that was suppressed for a while, and in the marriage, and when my husband wasn't feeling very well, I didn't have that. I wasn't received my laughter very well when he wasn't feeling good, and enjoyment. And so I kind of changed who I was a bit, and it felt like I shrunk myself down.
Yeah. So we'll go into the next phase, because again, you've got more that you can share around going through a divorce and what that was like for you. But before we do that, we always talk about the challenges of business and the reality of it, because I think sometimes people look at both of us from the outside and going, oh, it's all just like so good.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've got these masks on. I think we're both pretty honest, and that's why we're sharing on here today. But yeah, just to let people know that even though you do follow your passion and your purpose, there are challenges along the way. But if it is something in line with your passion, your purpose, then you will be able to overcome them easier. But it's not to say that it's all smooth sailing.
No, and I think that's the lessons for me. Even the grief of selling my business when it was making good progress, and I built that up, and it was like, oh, but that's my identity around there. So I had this vision of what I was growing, and at a young age, I was like, that's success. But what now? What will you do when you move on from that? But what I've learned along the way is that those building blocks of knowledge that I gained from running that business, because I had no experience with business when I came out of physio school. I felt like I didn't know enough, and that's even though I did pretty well at physio training. But I just didn't know enough. So I went very early on back to do my master's in physio as well. and lower back pain, and a lot of a bit of research into that. And it helped me just feel this, or actually look at things in a different way. And so then when I went back into business, I realized I had to apply those skills to that. And it meant that clinical reasoning, that analyzing things, it takes time and energy, and you've got to work for that long-term change. So it's definitely not always roses. And as you and I know, we're always adapting and always changing. And sometimes, like last year, I mean, with COVID and with again, we'll talk about what happened the last few years soon, but there was this real fear again on my back of that I'm not going to be able to provide for my family. And again, at the moment, it was just me. And I always had this pressure of like, if I'm not doing it, who's there for them? Who's going to help my kids? How do I provide stability? And so that was a driver for business. But then it was also this like, oh, but I'm not getting there. Oh, I'm not getting there. And then this like snowball effect would come with business. And it was with exposure, with people connecting and seeing what I was doing. And people were saying, because I was just shifted my lens on what I was doing with my online work even more, and going, you know what, I'm going to commit to this. And I'm going to make this effort and change, because it's something that I'm really passionate about, but it was almost my side hobby business. I didn't quite put the money in as much as I should or could. And it wasn't taking off as fast as I'd like it to. So I would go, right, I better focus on the stuff that's bringing the money in, bringing the bacon home. And it was COVID in many ways that just went, look, are you going to do it or not? I was like, fine, I'm stepping up. And what frustrated me is that in this journey, I had this amazing life coach, as we all need coaches along our way, as you and I are coaches to others. This coach, and when I started my physio practice, actually, so when I was 24, and there were some pearlers that she shared with me. And along the way, one of the exercises was working through this true intention and visioning of what you want for your life. And it came really clear at 26 when I did this manifesting and visioning of what I wanted. And I actually couldn't do it then. I wasn't ready to do that vision, because I think a lot of my belief systems and what I was doing was consuming it. And so it took me to have all these experiences to finally step up into that. And that vision was to be a global leader in health and wellness, not actually in physio. And I always remember looking back and being like, oh, so that's not the hat that I'm wearing as strongly, but it's this inspiration. And at 26, that was really scary. And I was like, not ready for that. Let's park that. And then it's come up in the last decade, particularly, about going, you're going to do it. Are you going to do it? And then I still see that as, even I'm working on a global level, and it doesn't mean that it's millions of people. It can be just that it's working to one or one to many. But either way, it's making a change and a bigger impact.
Yeah. Well, you work one-to-one with someone and everyone's life around them changes.
Mm, absolutely. Especially with the work that both you and I do. It's all about the ripple effect out.
And it is about letting go of that identity of I'm an osteo, I'm a physio, and what you trained in, and just being prepared to evolve that. Like, I'm going through a bit of an identity crisis at the moment. What do I call myself? Because I'm not doing hands-on work anymore. How can I communicate to the world what it is I do?
I know. I was thinking the same thing for you. And then again, for me, I had kept going through these ideas. I'm a wellness architect. It's this transformational coach. It's like, do you know what? I still really like to stab people, make them breathe, and make them feel better. Can you just put that in a bubble? And it's a weird place to be. I don't know. I think that's not my forte. You need somebody else that's that brand person that can help you wrap it up in a tiny little package. But in the end, people don't know what it will be until they experience it.
Exactly. It is so about the experience, because we were talking the other day when we were on our little hotel retreat doing our workation, that ultimately we're all after the same thing when we're working in this space. It's to get people to express themselves for who they are, be more connected, and just live the life that they're meant to. But there's all this back stuff, which is where, stabbing people with needles and like cracking their joints can actually help create more awareness around this.
And unwind the physical changes that occur. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? With what you see and what I've seen, is that our body keeps a score, as a great book from Bessel van der Kolk talks about. And it's these muscle memories, the reactivity of it, nervous system, all these things that mean that even if a past experience is gone and happened, our body can still react in that moment and feel it in a complete experiential moment. And so
Yeah.
you've got to be able to find ways that you can desensitize to that. And it's been a really big journey for me, is understanding that reaction to grief, trauma, and stress, which I didn't get trained enough in my physio training. And I don't know about you for the osteo,
I
but
don't think any of us do as healthcare
no.
practitioners.
And
Even
that's the
some
thing, is
psychologists and counselors say that.
true. I think you're right. They're like, let's just deal with this box up here, these top 2 inches. And,
Which is the
maybe,
head, because
yeah.
I can see the video.
Okay, good point. The top 2 inches being your head, and then the influence on your body. That's me pointing to my body, and how that's going to change your, one influences the other. It completely is. And then there's this middle piece, this like actual amazing puzzle piece, that nervous system, which is so misunderstood.
Yeah. And so this will probably lead nicely into, I guess, how you got into stress and stress relief and breathing in particular around, your relationship. You'd moved to this small town now, and that didn't fix the problem. So let's go into that.
No. Yeah. So I think one of the big journeys was because even though my partner was in pain and hurting, I couldn't help him. I couldn't be the one to fix him. Really annoyed me, because someone you care about, you want to make them feel better and support them. But it was his journey to go on, and it's been interesting that actually, and I have reflected on this because I've gone, he's better off now that we're divorced, both emotionally and psychologically. But I think that's because his journey needed to go on, that we were both meant to be married and both meant to have these beautiful babies and to be in each other's lives in this kind of supportive way. So it's it's quite funny. I think it'd go, oh, how much was I contributing to that situation? But I know that I was reactive and personally exhausted, and my needs were not being met in lots of ways. So lots of lessons that came up. And particularly with a divorce for me, because I was probably the catalyst in saying, I'm not happy after all this time of carrying it. And it came up in this way where it was so strongly, almost not violent in my body, but this awareness. It's like, something needs to change. Something needs to change. Something needs to change. I don't know what it was, but I needed to go, look, we need to go do something about this. We can't just stay in this state of unhappiness for me. And I'm speaking up now because I'm carrying it and my emotions matter, and I need to deal with this. Otherwise it's going to stay stuck in my body and hurt me in years to come. So we did this process of the old counselling, and I don't think we found that right person for us to do that. And I don't, because it was Mike's nightmare to go to counselling. He even said, oh, he's like, this is the most painful experience. And then when the counsellor said that she's like, need to have him come by himself, I was like almost cracking up going, this poor guy, he's not going to cope with 1 hour by himself in there. But now he's fine and he can talk and he's expressing it. It's like, yes, I love seeing this journey. But back then it was just like literally a body pain from psychological and emotional torture. So we went down this pathway, and it just, I think for me, I kind of just, the tools with the understanding the stress and breathing is what made me able to get through this divorce process so amicably. And I didn't know that was going to be the outcome. Like, I really wanted it to be a different outcome. And I still grieve and have moments now where it's like, I don't have that family unit that I see in other people. And this was not meant to be my story. This is not my upbringing, Divorce is a dirty word in my family. I kind of thank my brother who did it first, which sounds really bad. Sorry, bro. But it made it that little bit easier to be like, I can't stay in this because this isn't going to work. And so we had a lot of hard and long conversations about how we would do this in a way that was going to be the less impact onto all of us that were involved in that. And we met that core family, the kids, and Mike and I, and how is it going to be to actually work that out. And it involved us really making sure that we would show up and have conversations, and that I would hold space for him to be able to share when he could, and when we could have those little stepping stones. And it meant that we did things very differently. For about 4 months, we didn't tell anybody we were separating, and it was business as usual to everybody else. And I guess that's the idea of that mask, that people don't see and see behind. And probably now my mask is like down on the floor all the time, and I probably should bring it up sometimes with all the things that I've been through. But here we are. And I think that vulnerability and openness is where others learn. So that's where I'm going to show up now. But back then it was very scary to go through that process of divorce. And I think if I do write a book one day, it's going to be 2 books. One is going to be about divorce and how people go through it in a way that can be as amicable as possible. Another one's about the con man story that we'll talk about later on. So the first one really is that first learning was that if I could regulate me, that's going to impact everybody else around. So there was different ways I would do that. It was sometimes it meant that I didn't express myself the way that I probably wanted to express myself. I would do that in different ways, like journal. I would talk with friends. I would scream in the car. I would cry, but I wouldn't do it in front of Mike because I didn't want to hurt him when he was already in lots of pain with everything else. So I made sure that I tried to find a way to express so that it wouldn't be as volatile and reactive in the relationship at the moment. So I tried to bring it down as much as possible, knowing that I had to do that. Otherwise, my body was going to be just holding, and it still did. I still remember having the classic divorce back pain, as I call it, that right side of lower back that often comes on from people protecting. And I never understood that from really, and for one of my patients years and years ago in Wanaka, she was divorcing and separating. Oh no, she didn't tell me that she was actually going that pathway. She was sort of unhappy in the marriage and she kept coming with right side of back pain. And I was like, needle it, release it. I was like, so what's going on here? And then she came, she's now I've been a friend for years, but she came back in and she's like, my husband and I are separating. My back pain's gone away though.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, you've chosen, haven't you? She goes, I chose it. So,
yeah.
And she was the one that said to me, it's 2 years. I was like, what's 2 years? She goes, the process of divorce. I was like, oh shit, sorry. I was like, no, that's not fair. I'll fast track that. That'd be fine. I'll go faster. You know me.
Can I talk about the low back pain?
Yeah, go for it.
Because I call it financial lower back pain because it's a real crossover between 3 chakras. The base chakra, which is all about your sense of security, stability, grounding, foundations, and values, and getting your basic needs met.
Yep.
And then your sacral chakra, which is all about relationships. So relationships with family, your partner, the contracts in life, which include marriage and divorce, or even the starting or the ending of a relationship. And then your solar plexus, which is all about your identity and expressing yourself and valuing yourself, and then all of a sudden having to put yourself out in the world, especially if you're in a relationship where you're actually quite dependent on your partner.
Yes.
So I noticed, the divorce lower back, that's a new one, financial lower back pain, because when you think, my gosh, I'm going to end this relationship, what's going to happen with my finances? How am I going to survive on my own when I've got responsibility, especially for kids? And then I noticed that the child support question comes in for a lot of people involved in this is, where is the money going to come from? And then the solar plexus of, what am I going to do now to make an income and support myself in this divided family or separated family? So it's one of the probably hardest decisions to make. But then this is why I love sharing these stories, and you sharing that client's story as well, is that when she made the decision, the pain went away.
Yeah.
And then it's like, let's talk to those deeper emotions.
Exactly. Our culture's not very good at doing that. So it's actually this is why I want to talk about it, because the more that we can understand that journey of grief, then we're more empowered to help ride the wave, because it's such a journey and our body will carry it. And I think that's something for me as I went through this process of understanding that and more about the psychosomatic and that body. Yeah, like that tuning into your body. When you start to tune in and really listen to what it's saying to you, you actually see how much you've stored from way back when.
Yeah.
And you've actually got to work through the layers and delayer it to actually see, where can you actually make those shifts? Otherwise, they'll keep coming up.
Yeah. So if you're looking for some drama in your life, just go back into your own story.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things I also realized with that is you can only do that when you feel safe and calm.
Yeah.
So big bit that I learned about, why breathing was so important for me was because it's the only way that you can tap into your autonomic nervous system, which is controlling your heart rate, your blood pressure, your hormones, your stress response, and many other things. And it is the only thing that's under conscious and subconscious control on that kind of feedback loop. So by being able to change that, you teach your body that it can get itself out of that danger mode and into safety. Okay. And that's a really big thing that has been, I guess, one of my big lessons with both the grief, but when you're in trauma phase. And I didn't think I would, need to go through a trauma phase to really experience this, but apparently that is part of my journey. And I now understand how much that recovery is so different depending on what you've been through. And
Yeah.
building those tools up is so important to help you get through it.
Again, we were having an interesting conversation on our walk the other day about when you change your breathing, trauma can actually come up. And I notice this a lot, that when people feel like they're in a safe space, either with me or with another therapist, when they're ready, all the stuff can get stirred up to the surface and it feels really uncomfortable. So can you speak a little bit about that, especially to people who might be doing breathing practices out there and actually the shit comes up?
The shit really comes out. So this is a good thing for us to discuss because it's not a one size fits all model with breathing. And that's, I guess, my background as a physio has helped me to explore that from the physical aspects, from the muscles to the anatomy, deeper down, as well as the physiology and how that all links in together. And then that brain chemistry that comes along with it. Now, breathing is obviously, we're all breathing right now, hopefully, if you're listening to this. And there are the ways that you breathe that can push our body into this sort of stress state. And then there are ways that we can modify our breathing that can calm it down. And there are many techniques out there. So what I have found is that we need to find the techniques that allow you to get your pattern right first, that bring you back into a calm state before you start to manipulate the breathing and go into any of the faster, more intense breathing that has this cathartic response, which often I know a lot of people that are doing the breathing teachers that have learned this, and depending on their background, they may not have as much of the knowledge, or they may not be as aware of that emotional connection with it. Particularly your diaphragm is where all your meridians go through from your acupuncture. It's your main digital chakra. So if you start to release that diaphragm and suddenly everything comes up, we need to be able to figure out how to get people out of that state as well. So I always teach people, we need to get you to calm first before we get you to express and start shifting things. So
Yeah.
it's sort of dialing the volume down in your nervous system before you crank it back up. And the problem is it's probably been already on the up for too long, and that's exhausting for your nervous system. It needs to be able to get back into that safe, calm, relaxed way. Many of us, including me, are not taught that in our life. So this is why I do this, because those simple techniques and tools used in day-to-day moments, but used also to help you sleep better, to help you rest, recover, and laugh, love, and enjoy. Those are really important, but it's not a one size fits all. It's got to be careful with what we do with this.
Yeah, and that's what I find is a lot of people going on this journey of trying to work out what to do with their stress and their emotions is it is a bit of a minefield. There's so much information out there, but where do you start? What do you do? And how do you do it safely? And so I do highly recommend that if you're not really getting results from your own research and working on yourself, this is where you need to reach out to someone to help
Yeah.
facilitate the process.
Exactly. And that's what I've been working on. That was literally my vision, was because I would do all this work one-to-one in my clinic with patients and be like, right, let's see how you're breathing. Let's look how we're doing this. Let me tell you about stress. Let me show you how this impacts your body and the ripple effect out. And I was like, I can say this to many and support them
Mm.
along this journey. And because it's a journey, you can't just do a day, one workshop and think that it's going to impact your long-term outcomes if you don't implement it and put it into your day-to-day habits. And that's where, for me, I've been like, I'm not going to do anything shorter than or a 2 or 3 day course on online. It has to be something that's over 30 days. So people start to put these practices into place. They start to tune in, and because stuff comes up. Every day is different, For women, 30 days, you've got a whole cycle in there often, and you've got the fluctuations of your hormones that in the first place, the last week of your before your period comes, you got high levels of progesterone, which are going to make you breathe faster. So the whole PMS thing, it's because you're breathing poorly probably as well.
Oh,
There's
interesting.
lots of layers to it and then we're like, why can I feel calm? It's like, because if your baseline is already on alert mode and then you get triggered by hormones that last week, then that gets put to the next level as well. So learning to drop your baseline down, but baseline of calm takes work and effort. And it's all about holding a mirror up to yourself. It's really what I'm doing in my online courses and my retreats, in-person retreats, and in my women's courses as well. It's about getting you to tune in, understand what your habits are, understand your triggers, because I know your work is a lot about triggers as well. And finding tools that will help you, I guess, that ride the roller coaster, the highs and the lows, but in a way that get you back into a more even keel.
Yeah, well said.
Thanks. This is my jam, man. I can talk about this all day.
I know, I don't want to stop you. So are we ready to go into the next phase? The most
Do
recent.
it. Do
All
it.
right. So what happened? Was it last year or the year before? I can't even remember now.
2018. So just to go back to that. So when you, as a single lady, all the single ladies getting out there, at the end of a road, I live 40 minutes from a main city. I was encouraged by lots of friends to get out there and start dating. And I hadn't dated since I was like 22. And even then, I shitted it, basically. I was really bad. I didn't know what I was doing. You met someone at the pub. It's really through friends that I met my husband back then, and it just kind of evolved. Now we have this thing called online dating. And I was like, oh, well, there's nobody that's an eligible bachelor in where I lived for me. So I started this journey of just finding me in the first place. This is 4 years ago that we now were divorced or separated. So it's been a big journey in the last 4 years. And I met some people and it was nice and lots of learning. But 2 years ago, or just over 2 years ago now, I met somebody that I dated for around 6 months, just under 6 months. And how do I put this? He was a con man. That's as simple as it was. He changed his name legally so that I could never find out who he was. I think it's been probably my biggest teacher, apart from the children piece, but from this trauma and who I am, like how strong I really am. So then so for 6 months, he weaved his way into my life. And I have been brought up very in a very loving environment in many ways. And my default is to trust. That's what many of us are like. As I work with a psychologist to help capture the story, and what she was saying is that our nature and the research shows our default is to trust. So I didn't expect somebody was actually out there to hurt me, or that was their intention. So over that time, this man, he got to know me, he wooed me, and was there at an emotional level that nobody else had been, which is ironic because that's clever as a con man. Because if your needs aren't being met, then you want them to be met, and you will overlook other things because of that, if you're that emotional and psychological stuff. So I look back and I go, I didn't even, it just kind of happened in many ways. It was just, I was really busy with work and with life. And he started to approach this idea of investing because he was a successful entrepreneur. Like, I'd seen that he was working with businesses. There was red flags when I was dating him that I was like, I don't know about that. So I would Google and look back and talk to my sister in London, who's like my soul twin sister in many ways. And we would discuss things and it would be like, it doesn't quite sound right. But we couldn't find the evidence because he changed his name. And then he'd show up in different ways. So there was this kind of, you'd have like multiple lies that were covered over. And my gut was telling me it's not good enough. Something's not right here. But the psychological piece kept overriding it. And I didn't listen in, and I was too busy, as I can be, growing the business, growing the breath effect, the online, but also being there for the kids and focusing on that was priority. And again, that whole financial stability, my goal was to be there with the kids. I had my home. It was beautiful. I was very lucky. We'd worked really hard. I hadn't done the OE experience like many of my friends did. I just started a business. And so I had done so much in this early phase that I was set up in some ways, but also I had debt, I had mortgages, and life was really still kind of like on the hamster wheel. So he then proposed this idea a few months into it, they're dating, and that it was like this business arrangement. So it wasn't even a relationship arrangement. And I wasn't looking to do anything of that sort with this person at the start. I was looking at investing in some property, which I've done before with my ex-husband, and we did a really good job of that. And this guy knew all those things about me, as he, heard my conversations and listened so intently. And he knew that my things that I valued was time with my kids and financial stability. And he honed in on those two things to say, I can help you out. I can help you out. So he came with this arrangement, this deal. He'd even set up businesses in his new name, which was illegal, to then be able to convince me that he was who he said he was. He had a document that he'd had an accountant in Australia, Tasmania, where he was from, that he ended up, it's a forgery, but it looked in many ways, we look back now, I'm like, should have seen that one. But it was, it had like the business footer and letterhead and stuff as well with it all. And he said that he owned several millions of dollars, and that my investment was always going to be secure and safe. And several other people saw that, including banks and other people. And he said, I have all this money, it's fine, this is who I am. And so I wasn't the only person that was lied to or conned, which I don't think it's always good that I don't like that other people were conned as well. But I know that it was bigger than me. And that part of it was because I trusted and I wanted someone to be good, and it was completely the opposite. It was so evil. And so I ended up investing some money, quite a bit of money, and it was all on my mortgage. There was something I was going to do for the properties anyway. But and it was him that came back and said, you know what? I can help you out. I can help you out more. I can give that security so you can really step back and you can really follow your dream. I was like, what? This is amazing. And you're doing all your business meetings. I see you've got your businesses online. I can see all the registrations, because I've been a stalker, because my gut was telling me to be a stalker. Not my normal way, but something wasn't right. And so it got to the point where I was just about to invest a big chunk of money, a hefty chunk of money. And my good friend, Sasha, who I run these women's retreats with in New Zealand, her and I had been doing this retreat, and I said to her, look, this is what I'm doing. It's like amazing. He's showing up in all these ways, and he's allowing me to have this flexibility. She's like, huh, didn't say too much. She's like, that's really interesting, Emma. And she sat with it. And then over the next weekend, she went back and talked to her partner then, Matt, and was like, I don't have a really good feeling about this. Doesn't feel right. And he was like, this sounds like how my father was conned, and or somebody else that he knew had been conned. And he goes, you need to do something about this. She could be being conned. And so they knew that the way that I am, they couldn't just come and tell me that, and I'll be like, oh yeah, sure, I've been conned. Thanks, guys. I'll just break up with them. They were like, must show her evidence, must prove it. And so her and my other good friend Joe and their partners went down this rabbit hole of going deep dive into Magnum PI styles, searching deeper than I had done, or I thought I'd done the research, but not like them. And they uncovered that through, again, this real weave of things, that he had another name. And this other name, then when they put it into the Google, it came up with the arrest or the crime that he did in 2016, I think it was, for fraud. Not relationship fraud, but business fraud. And it was a pretty big moment when they found that out, because they were like, God, how do we tell her? What do we do? Anyway, the fast story is then a few days later, they were like, we're going to have to go tell her. And that was April 2019. April the 8th, I think it is. It's pretty emblazoned into my head. And
Had you already invested the money?
Yeah. So the timing wise, it's pretty ironic. So there was the few weeks before, I'd put $50,000 in. I hate saying numbers like this because everyone goes when I say it. And I, like, that was all mortgage, and I set up loans. I had a lawyer. My lawyer was involved, documents and stuff. So it was like, I've got security. Yeah, I felt like it was really a safe, sound investment. How I was wrong. So that day before, on that Monday, I had invested another. So he'd convinced and walked back to my bank, talked to my bank and said, no, I'm good for this. I'd invested $250,000 that Monday before I found out who he was. That next day I found out, and it was like, uh, my friend Joe messaged me and said, I need to talk to you. And I was like, oh, I'm a bit busy. I've got to go to work, got things to do, shit to be done. And she's like, no, I need to talk to you. I was like, okay, what? And she goes, sends this article through, and she goes, he's not who he says he is, basically. And I'm like, okay. I didn't really believe it in that point. I was like, oh. And then about 10 minutes later, this is like 7 a.m. or 7:20 a.m. She pops up outside my house in this window. And I was like, and I had to suddenly be like, right. And she was like, you need to listen. This is real. And I was like, okay, I'm listening and I'm reading it. But if this is true, my world is falling apart right now. And she's like, it's true. And so I remember just being like this feeling of, oh God, no, this can't be my reality. Like, how do I even get out of this? How do I even protect my family? Why would I didn't even get to the why yet. I was just like, what do I do? And that day was in slow-mo. And it was a day that I didn't know I had as much power and strength and bravery than I do. It was an intense, amazing day. And I remember Joe had left the house and it was still in the morning, and I sat on the side of my bed. The kids are out in the living room, and I just sat down and I was like, nobody does this to me. He's not going to get away with it, and I'm going to fight, because nobody hurts me like this. And it was that choice. And I realize now how powerful that moment is. As I've done the research and looked into this and tried to understand how did it even happen and how do I recover, this lotus of control is so important. And when you are powerless, it keeps you in that freeze mode and that state of being unable to let go and release, or basically exhale. You're kind of like, and I already feel myself going. I was hijacked. My nervous system was like, right, you must get out of this, figure it out. And so it was step by step. And I had Joe there through that day. And I managed to freeze some of the money with the help of the fraud department, or most of the money. But the only way I was going to be able to go and get that money was by going to the bank with the con man, with Mr. Tonks. Bearing in mind that day, it's a big story, but that was the only time I ever saw him in person physically until the day that he was in court and standing charges for this. So it's a long story, but the crux of it was, and after 2.5 months, I had to pretend. From that day I found out who he was. Those 2.5 months, I had to pretend that I was a victim, and he did that. I didn't know who he was, and as in I still thought he was the same thing. I had to work to get my money back as much as possible, and the lies kept coming through. There was a lot of lies from him, and it took those 2.5 months just holding my head above water and fighting that somehow we worked with the police and built this case. And he'd flown back to Australia to kind of run away and hide. And then he flew back into New Zealand after I don't know for what was the final straw, but we think we convinced him to come back to New Zealand to give the relationship a go. I don't know. It's pretty, who knows what he was thinking. And there was other cons ahead on the go that I think he was trying to get going. And I knew that he was going to be arrested on landing if he did ever come back in the country. And that's what happened. So then there's this moments of like relief. Like that day that I found out he'd been arrested, it was just like drop to the knees. I know it was in my, like, a lot of this time I had done this solo because I'm not very good about reaching out for help. And I didn't have that person in my life that he was trying to be that person, but he wasn't very good at it. And then I was the one trying to pull it together. And so that moment I got that phone call from the detective saying, we've got him. I don't know how the sound would have been if someone recorded it. It would have sounded like a dying animal or something, but it was like a cry, laugh, and like evil at the same time. And I just was like, I got him. That was when the recovery started. Like that was only a piece of the puzzle. I'd just been surviving. So There's a big journey to it. I've learned so much about listening to my gut. It's why I do this woman's work that I do. It's why I teach people about how you work through and recover from trauma, whatever kind it's going to be. And that there are stepping stones you need to do to get your body back into a state of feeling safe. And yeah, it's been the making of me. And I definitely don't recommend anybody else going through a con man experience to do that. But I am in the best place of my life. I am so grounded. I am making plans and visioning and creating the life that the kids and I are going to experience in a phenomenal way. And I don't need anybody else to do that with. And that's been such a shift for me to feel like I can't, I've got this, it's, even though it's hard, so hard, I've got this.
It's an incredible story.
And the weird thing is now, especially talking about it with you, Jen, obviously it's feel like I'm sharing with a friend, but I know that people listening are going to be like, what the fuck happened there, lady?
Yeah.
In many ways.
And you actually, from the outside, people not knowing what was going on would have thought,
I know.
you're still like going absolutely fine, but you're organizing, what is it? You call it conning the con man. You're organizing your own con in the background.
Yeah. So it was, you had to put the mask up. I was like, I've got to survive, and I can't let people know what's going on, because if it got back to him in any way, the community in New Zealand's small. If he knew that I was going to the police and working with them, then I was worried that something was going to happen. And I didn't know who this person was. As a psychopath or sociopath, whatever he is, it's very hard to know who you're working with. So for me, safety was paramount, and that for me and the kids. And there was moments where I think people feared for my safety more than I did. Maybe that's my reckless nature. Not reckless, but just that I felt like I knew what I was dealing with. But their fear was almost worse to deal with sometimes. And as you go through any grief experience, you kind of, sometimes you have these out of body experiences when people say things. Whether it's that you're going through a major illness. My sister Sarah in London had cancer a few years ago, and so my sister did too. But I remember Sarah talking about the cancer bingo. People would say things, and you'd just be like, "Yeah, at least it's only like stage 3 cancer." It's like, it's still cancer, people. Or you lose a child, and someone says, "Well, at least you've got another child." And so people would say things with this, and you'd be like, right, so you're not quite getting the fact that I'm going through a huge life trauma right now. Okay. I remember one, bless them, someone said to me, "Oh, I lost more money on the share market." And I was like, "Did you date the share market? Because I'm pretty sure it's pretty bad when you date them and they fuck you over." Sorry for swearing.
Good.
But that came out of the con man process. That was my cathartic experience with swearing. I think there's this innate learning to listen, people, that has come out of this. And I would like to think that now I'm a better listener, that I can stop and pause and just hear what's going on in someone's life. And we teach this in women's retreats, our online stuff, our in person, that just learning to stop and pause and connect with somebody is so powerful. And that can help somebody as they go through a traumatic experience. You don't need to fix it. I know that several people in my life were just like, "I wish I could take the pain away from you." But you can't. But you can be there for me, and you can just hold my hand or let me cry.
Yeah.
Just let me be there. Let me dissolve, because I didn't have those people to let me dissolve.
Yeah. And I feel like this ties into what you said about your divorce as well, is that you couldn't actually help your now ex at that time. You had to let him go through that journey, and you held that space for him on reflection. And I can't imagine how hard it was to go through this with the con man and have to not be able to speak to other people around you, because that is the way we seek out support.
Yeah.
And to have to, keep it all behind closed doors, because it was kind of painfully slow but fast at the same time, the process of actually catching him, wasn't it? Because you knew for months, and you just know he's going around in society.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah. I was worried. I mean, he was working on his other cons. He'd changed his name in Australia. He was working on that, changing his name in Australia. And in many ways, so Sarah in London, who my lovely sister there, her and I have helped share this story so people can learn from it. So our podcast that is helping to share the story, Conning the Con, and we're very lucky to be joined by the amazingly talented and beautiful Dr. Sophie Muir, who's a clinical psychologist, to help people unwind this kind of behavior, these lessons, these learning to understand the red flags and the boundaries. But Sarah, along the way, was my true crime sidekick. And again, never thought I'd have this experience in my life. And we still laugh. Like, so she's my laughter medicine. And even though she's on the other side of the world, we connect daily with what we, with this whole process. And when I was like, I can't cope with it, I can't message him back, because I never saw him or talked to him in person from that day in the bank. And the day that I found out who he was, there was all just messages, and it was just all manipulations back from him. And I was like, how do I kind of frame it so I get the money out of him? And then she would often like write a message back for me like, just send this. And I was like, oh thank God, someone else is helping me out.
Your copywriter.
My con copywriter. My conny writer. We've got so many bad plays on the word con. And the first episode of which is out. I don't know when this is going to be released, but the first episode's now is out, and it's the rom con, not the romantic comedy. So we've got lots of laughter, because if I didn't laugh at that process, the ridiculousness of it would have been too overwhelming, and it was my way of tricking my nervous system. And he kind of added to it. He actually helped the laughter, which I'll never really thank him, I don't think, for this experience. But
well, it was ironic because what was the TV show that he?
Oh, Dirty John.
Yeah.
So my sister Sarah was watching Dirty John in London and was like, you need to get him to watch this. This is before we were dating. I was like, oh, okay. So we sat down and watched it together for most of it. And then he's like, oh, I'll just watch the rest of my own sort of thing. I was like, too close to home.
So,
and even she looked at Dirty
John is about a con man.
Yeah. So it's basically my story without the murder at the end. So it's New Zealand's Dirty John. That's the way I put it. So it's been, I don't know how this has happened in my life. I just keep going, oh, well, it's a weird one for the grandkids to say in a few years' time. But I do realize that this experience has shaped me. And the more that I share it, I have more open and vulnerable conversations with people. And I'm at this place right now where I am going to share it. This podcast is very raw, and I never thought I'd be able to step up and do this. And there's part of me that I have to work through that shame that this happened, that I was conned. And that's a big, we've got people that we know that have been conned as well that just can't talk about it in this way. But I want people to know that, first of all, there's help in lots of different ways, and that, you're stronger than you think, but you can do things to get yourself through and recover, whatever it is.
Yeah. Now, I think a question that people are going to have is, did you ever get your money back?
I got a lot of it back, but so that day that I went to the bank, I managed to freeze 200,000 in there. And the podcast will explain the rest of the money and how it trickled back through, but there was still a big chunk outstanding. And so the judge then in sentencing said to him, he's still in jail right now at the moment, that he had to pay reparations of at least 78, I think it was like 75,000. I can't remember what it is now, because I kind of blur a lot of the stuff, the trauma process, you like numbers and things. I'm like, and especially because it doesn't matter, because then what happened is the con man went back to the High Court, I think it was, and said, this is too high for me to pay back. And so he got it reduced to 13,000 reparations for me. And 5 of that was emotional damages. I'm like, oh, well, looks like they put some value on my emotions and all this whole process. Because it's going to be hard on him, the hardship of the con man to get back his life. I'm like, oh, really? I feel like he should have thought about that before he did what he did.
Consequently, taking responsibility for your actions.
Yeah. Oh, especially because all the apology letters that come out. Like, I just spoke at court to do my victim impact statement.
Yes, I wanted to go through this because this is really big and something that a lot of people may not have done. But
No,
yeah,
and we share this in the podcast. That actually,
oh,
people have been saying to me, we're going to record the actual victim impact statement, because people are like, what does it even look like or sound like? I'm like, oh, it sounds like pain. It sounds like my verbal pain. And no one prepares you really, I think, for what the court process is going to be like. And so I drove down to Invercargill. I've actually been to court twice before that. So once before that, in November the before, which was for a sentence indication, which was basically to figure out how long he would get if he pled guilty. It's like, so they kind of say, like, if you take a little, just say you did it, we'll just take a little bit of time off, here you go. It's crazy. And so I'm sitting, or the day before I was going to be going to that, the detective was going to be going with me. He's been, again, my rock and amazing all the way through the process. And then that Sunday night before court, he goes, I've got called to Invercargill. I can't make it down there. And I was like, oh, I'll be fine. I'll just go along. So I walk into court. And I'm like, I'm a victim of the thing. Like, I just remember being like, I'm just in this trance, going in, shaking, not knowing what was going to happen. And I sat down, and then he comes on camera, because he's video linked in from Invercargill prison, where he's been since he was arrested. So that was since June 2019 to November that year. And I just sat there boiling. I've never felt probably as much anger as I had. And as the judge went through the case and was explaining things, and then his defense got up and was like, well, he tried really hard because he paid that money back at the start. So he's worked really hard to, show that he's a good person. The judge was like, no, let me stop you there. I was like, oh, thank God, because I'm about to step up here and say something. And that trauma response of shaking was really powerful for me. And I looked at the shaking and trauma release exercises for several years, and never really understood that power of the shake. And so that's been a really good experience in many ways. But I came out of that going, I am not going back there without my rock beside me. So when I went to do the sentencing, because he did plead guilty weeks and weeks later afterwards, and we went back in March 2020 for sentencing. Sasha, it was very much full circle. She was the one that said to me, I don't think this is right, or said to my friend Joe, and then went down the rabbit hole of finding out who he was. And she happened to be down in Creekstone area and drove down with me. And she's an amazing woman, so powerful. And I'm so lucky I get to work with her. But those last few minutes, I could feel the shake coming on. And she's like, do you want to put some music on? I was like, yes. And I need to like get this out of me, like get my energy up to deal with what I'm going in. So we played Pink Don't, what is it? I can sing it. Don't fuck with me. Basically, it's the Conman song.
Is the name of it?
No, it's not. She has got a version of it in her latest one anyway. It was powerful. And then I get to the court, and the lawyer for me, or for the prosecutors, wherever they are, helps explain it. But I'm, the detective is there this time, and I'm going in there and I'm like shaking because I know I'm going to read this victim impact statement out. And so I sit and wait for that to come in, and I feel this invisibility cloak, like a Harry Potter style, over me from Sasha, who's like protecting me. She's there, and she's there in this other way, and it's so hard to explain. But I was like, I've got this. I am going to get this. The con man walks out into the holding area. First time I've seen him in person, and he looks terrible. And I'm like, he doesn't look up. He never makes eye contact at one moment with me. And I'm like, I got the power right now. This is my chance, and I'm going to get up and speak my truth. So I get up, and of course my hands are shaking, and I'm so glad for my Toastmasters training. So if you don't know what Toastmasters is, but it's speech training and not drama, but like to help you speak and craft public speaking. Ironically, I thought it would be like for a future wedding or for my kids or something. This has become really useful for my business. It came in useful for my victim impact statement. And so I got there, and I held every word. Some of it I remember being like angry about and just like hammering it home. And then he had to listen. He had to hear what he did to me. And it was powerful. I got out of the court, and he was sentenced, and it will never ever feel like enough time that he's away, because it's not about me. It's about that he's going to do it again. I don't believe that this I always muck up sayings. This leopard's going to just change its spots, or its tiger's going to change its stripes, whatever it is. I don't see it, and it's something that we talked about with psychologists. Is can con men, change and reset? Can they become and do good in the world? And I would love to think that he could, but I don't think he will.
So, what would your advice be to other women? Because you have actually done a lot of research and work with psychologists, and I'm sure there's lots of information along the way on your podcast. So, we will
Yeah.
cover that and give the link to everybody. But on reflection now, because I think there were a few things that just didn't fit the picture, and this probably ties into, okay, how am I going to listen to my intuition next time? What would your advice be to other women out there, knowing that, okay, he's going to come out and there are the con men?
Yeah, he's not the only one. Like, to be honest,
Yeah.
that's the scary facts. As we've done the research on it, both Sarah and I, I think it's 1 in 4 people are what is it, sociopaths, and 1 in 20 are psychopaths. So it's quite a few people out there that have personality disorders that impact their behavior. So it's looking for signs is a big one. And red flags, when a red flag comes up, it's not just for dating someone, but because people are out there in your workplace. This sounds really scary, eh? Like, they're out there, but there are signs, and it's behaviors, and it's just tuning in. It's taking time. It's observing people and learning to get to know someone slowly, particularly if you're dating somebody, and listening to your gut. And you can only do that when you step away. One of the amazing things that Sophie talked about is actually to reflect on, how do you feel about that person when you are not around them? So they can make you feel all magical and amazing, especially with someone you're dating, and then you leave that environment, and then how do you feel? Because it can get clouded. And so it's like, actually, the only way you're going to tune into that is if you stop and pause and think and and listen. And for me, that's where the breath piece comes in, because it slows my nervous system down, so I can listen to my gut brain, my enteric nervous system, that is often shouting. But until I pause, I don't hear what it's saying often. So that's a big one, listening to that. And I think if you are concerned, is just talk to people around you that you trust. Trust is a big issue for me before this happened, and that people will hold your secrets or your feelings and your vulnerability in a way that's not going to be projected out to everybody else. So you want to find your people that are going to hold that space for you, so that you can go and do that safely. And for me, I really struggled with that from family experiences, and I've worked with that with the people to be like, I need to be able to trust you to be able to feel safe around you. And it's meant that I've had very different conversations with people in my life because of that. And I've had a culling, as you do when you go through something like this. You're like, quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
What
Now
about
you,
that? But boundaries are good too. Boundaries, people.
yes, boundaries, big one. Now you've been through the court process in a way that you didn't expect, and you had an amicable divorce. I wanted to speak about this just because I believe it's the art of communication, because once you get in the legal system, there is not a whole heap of emotion. It's all structure, processes, policies, and you do, yeah, like ridiculous things that you plead guilty and you get less time.
Yeah.
So, can you speak a little bit about communication? Because that is often what I will talk to my clients about if I know that they're heading towards a separation, is learn to speak up, because otherwise this is going to go into another relationship and it'll come up in another shape, way or form. But the power of communication is so important, even when you were doing your impact statement. It's that expression and speaking up the words that you don't want to have regret for not speaking up.
Yeah, I have learned so much around communication for that reason, because our marriage was one we didn't fight, which is often a sign that we're also not expressing ourselves, and lots of ways. Doesn't need to be fighting to do that, but we didn't have the big arguments by any means. It was, and that was a lot because I didn't want to actually hurt that person. I didn't want to express my feelings. So One of the things I really learned over this process is a great skills and techniques called non-violent communication, which it's, you know, NVC. It sounds like it's, you know, you shouldn't be hitting anybody anyway, but that's not about that. It's about somebody feeling so safe that they can open up. It's the stuff that we teach on the retreats and on the courses, and for women, they go home and like, I've got to teach my partner this, because you finally feel like you're being heard for once and being listened to. And a lot of about is about actually pausing, hearing what somebody's saying, and then even repeating it back and being like, oh, this is what I'm hearing you say. And they go, yes, that's what I'm meaning. And you're like, okay, good. And then you get a chance to express yours if the relationship goes right with that. But again, it's doing it from a grounded, calm place, making sure you do it in a time that's going to work for somebody else, and understanding what their needs are and what's going on with it. And I think sometimes one of the things I've done when I've worked with people, whatever, when I think about my ex, and with people that I work with and friends that maybe don't express themselves maybe as kindly to me as I would have hoped sometimes, or even if it's me, I go, okay, let's step back. What's going on in their lives? You know, we've got so many facets. Have they not slept well? Have they got emotional dramas going on? Have they got grief that hasn't been talked about for years? Is it something that they aren't able to express that has been, you know, boiling up? And now I have this kind of weird superpower with people's breathing, that I can see these different emotions that kind of like where they're holding. I'm like, okay, so without being too full on, but I'm guessing you maybe got some fear or anxiety or stress coming up, and or maybe there's some anger there, and they're like, how did you know? I was like, well, your body's holding in that pattern. Mirror people. And then they go, yeah, I've been really sad over the breakup of my relationship with my girlfriend for the last 2 years, and I don't know how to work through it. I'm like, well, let's work through it. Let's talk about it, because
it's when you actually just speak to it and you see it, and someone else sees it in you. You're like, oh God, I'm not actually hiding it that well.
Oh no, like
You have to be blunt, isn't it, Emma?
Yeah. As much as I say that people didn't probably see that, like they may not have seen that I was going through. People may have seen that something was up, but they didn't even go, hey, you okay? And that was interesting too. Is like, who are you people that are going to check on you and be like, right, are you all right? What's going on? To make sure you feel okay to say that. And I look back, and because the photos are from that 2019 year, which ironically ended up being one of my best years as well. That last 6 months was fabulous. Put them in jail, and I had the most amazing 6 months. And I had these photos because again, weird things in my career as a physio, or as whoever we are, about. He got arrested in June, and then a week later, I'd already planned a trip with my sister to see my sister in London and friends in Germany, which sounds really expensive. And I was like, I was going budget class with my kids in tow, and we were just dossing down to people's places. So just bearing in mind, I don't have a rich lifestyle by any means. It was just that family means a lot to me, and I want those moments with those people. It was very convenient that was already organized before this all happened. So I got over there to England, and with 2 kids in tow, all jet lagged, and I was emotionally spent, and she just basically picked me up and carried me there. And I had a month there with her and friends, and then it was so healing being away from from this whole experience. And then I got back to New Zealand, and 2 weeks later I had this phone call from a New Zealand pro golfer, and was like, do you want to come? I met him early in the year with some golf tournaments, and he's like, do you want to come to Europe, maybe China this year, to like help out and be my physio? And I was like, yes. I rang my ex-husband. I was like, oh my God, do you think we can make this work? And he's like, just say yes and go. I was like, best ex-husband ever. And I look, and I remember Sarah and I often laugh because I was walking along the Charles Bridge in Prague, and this cobblestone bridge, and it was beautiful. And I'm by myself because a lot of alone time for me is so important. It's recharging. As an extrovert, I need my alone time. Walking on this bridge, and I'm like, look what I'm seeing right now. This is gorgeous, amazing. And he's seeing 4 walls right now. That's his world. He's seeing those 4 walls of that cell. I'm okay. I am safe. I am growing, and I'm going to live my best life. And then I went to China later in the year, and it was just like, good people show up, and they see your potential the more that you show up and speak your truth. So I'm very grateful for all the people that have been in my life that have got me through, including you, Jen, and people that didn't even know they were getting me through.
My gosh, this is just like packed full of so much information, this podcast. I'm sure that you will help many, many people by sharing this story. And, you know, people listening to this can probably hear there is still some emotion in this.
Yeah.
But as you talk about it, as you express it, and you're clearly speaking your truth because I can't stop you, is that this
That's
is
normal
very,
though, Jen.
yeah.
With us.
Is there anything else that you want to share on hyperemesis, owning a business,
Oh,
family
it's so
support,
funny
and
because
money?
I remember like looking back at things and talking about your stress stories and like things that transformed you. When we first got together, we did those talks, and mine was about hyperemesis. And I'm like, oh, how life has changed. I got me some serious good stories right now. And I wouldn't change those stories because they make you who you are. But
Yeah.
I don't really want any more for a while.
No. Yeah, then you thought
And
your
then,
divorce was a big story and then you got
yeah,
caught.
the divorce is big. I was like, geez, get through that. And actually, ironically, when COVID hit, I was like, this is fine.
Yeah.
This ain't nothing on what I've been through. And I had other friends that had lost partners and other stuff. And I'm like, COVID's nothing when you go through that pain and you pull yourself back up. And I just wanted to speak to that piece of, like you said, there's emotion coming out when I talk about this. That emotion that comes from that love, from the people that supported me. That's really where that emotion comes from. And I'm so that I think because I love that feeling of having those people in my life. And again, Sarah, I mean, I had amazing family around, but she was that person that pulled me up when I was just on the floor. And so doing this process of doing the Conning the Con podcast with her, I mean, oh, God, I can't believe we're still friends in some ways because I'm a taskmaster with quality. And we'd be doing this podcast. I'm like, no, it's not going to be good enough. I don't want to say it like that. And she'd be like, okay, like swallowing it, being like, Princess Emma, podcast lady. And what we've created, the skills, she's never edited any podcast, and I think you've listened to a bit of it, and she's phenomenal with what she's done. And I just think the more that people go and be inspired by her as well of what her journey is post cancer and life, and yeah, YOLO, you only live once.
Yes, I saw that on the back of the van the other day. It's like, Gav, what does YOLO mean? Doesn't quite like roll off the tongue like FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah. You're too old these days, Jen. Yeah, so that's my big part. And I think it's just more about choosing. Everything's a choice. We just
Yeah.
don't always make it. We can freak out. We can don't always search for doing the best for ourselves. We can choose to be harmful. We can choose to be positive to ourselves, or we can choose a path that's going to serve our soul.
Mm. So, how can people find you? I know you've got multiple things out there.
Yes. There's a few ways you can work with me, which is always good. But the easiest way is my online business, The Breath Effect. So the Breath Effect is something I created 4 years ago with kind of that recovery after divorce and thinking this is what I wanted to share and having that final push to get it out there. And so there's a few ways that the Breath Effect works to influence people. I do speaking engagements, but I have got some online coaching and training that I do. There's 2 30-day courses, so 30 days working with me and having live training over that time, which helps people to reset their nervous system. And that for me has been, it's hard to kind of explain sometimes. I'm like, just change what we're doing, but it's bigger than just changing your breathing. It's looking at the habits, it's looking at the emotions, the triggers, and the way that it impacts your sleep. And so there's 2 courses. I've got one that's designed people that have got feeling stress and anxiety, gone through trauma and grief for men and women, and that's Breathe Right and Reduce Your Stress. And my other course is The Busy Woman's Guide to Cultivating Calm. And that I launched last year, and it really is a result of what I've been through, because this process of learning to reset after trauma for women has been one of my biggest lessons. And I've got some amazing women that have joined me to help share their stories on there with interviews, including yourself, Jen. And it guides women through over the 30 days with me doing our live trainings each week, this process of tuning in. And so looking at our mindset first, that first week, looking at the stress response, really understanding the science and nature behind that, working on our body, tuning into the body. And then finally, and the most important, most delicious part for me is tuning into the heart, the bit that gets missed.
Mm.
So it's this process that people go, well, you don't want to go to retreat, you got to go in person. I'm like, yes, you can, but what if you did something small every day that with supportive environment, with women that share and connect and do that MVC, that listen, it's really, really amazing. So there's those, and then I also run women's retreat in person. So in New Zealand, in Glenorchy, an amazing Camp Glenorchy. So I did about 4 or 5 of those each year, and those for me are amazing. They just fill my soul up as well. I love doing those.
I've heard incredible feedback about your in-person retreats and your the virtual retreats as well. And as you said, it's just about getting started, and it's so much better if you can do this and integrate it into your day-to-day life rather than going and doing a course for 2 or 3 days, being amazing in the moment and then not implementing any of it. And it is that accountability and implementing those newfound habits and knowing that there's other people around you who think the same way and do actually support you.
Yeah. I think that's what the last few virtual retreats, the Women's Cultivating Calm, their feedback has been, it's just when someone shares a story, it's like, oh, I felt like that. No, I felt like that. And you're like, we've all felt like that. And this is okay. Like that combination of being heard and being like, you're not alone.
Yep, absolutely. So people can find that information on thebreatheffect.com.
Yep. And Cultivating Calm is all on there as well. But the Conning the Con, if you Google that, you put Conning the Con in any of your podcasting, listening apps, whatever you listen to your podcasts on, Conning the Con is where you'll get each of the episodes. It's about 11 episodes, I think it is, maybe 1 or 2 bonuses. But and it's not just me talking like this. It's very highly edited, and it'll take you on a journey.
Yeah.
So please share, rate, and review that, because it helps us to get that exposure.
Yeah, and how you were saying that a lot of people do get conned out there. There's a lot of cons out there. Is definitely share it so that your friends don't end up having the experience that you had.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Emma. Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. You can join my free Facebook group where I go live regularly to teach you about different conditions and the deeper underlying emotions at play.